Take Back the Night is the earliest global effort to support survivors and stand against sexual violence. It is a catalyst in creating change, awareness, and emphasizing the prevalence and impact of sexual violence in communities across the world. The phrase "Take Back the Night" describes the primary concern of the movement when it first began: the safety concerns of women and trans folks at night. Today, we continue to advocate for the basic right to walk the streets at night, but we must also acknowledge how far-reaching Take Back the Night has become, evolving into demanding that folks feel safe at all times and can live lives free from sexual violence. Take Back the Night has truly evolved to encompass a general stand against fear of violence and harassment. Over the course of our evening, we will be sharing with you all the importance of Take Back the Night and what this event means to folks in our community. Moreover, we have asked leaders in our community to share their dreams for survivors, or the things they would like survivors to know, hear, and understand. Most saliently, each individual a part of our event this evening echoes in one way or another some messages at the core of SAVIS's approach to supporting survivors. No one is alone, no one asks for it, and standing in solidarity is increasingly important. An additional focus of this year's Take Back the Night is supporting and uplifting marginalized communities, with importance placed on the immeasurable resilience demonstrated in this difficult climate brought on by the pandemic. Sylvia Samsa, the Executive Director here at SAVIS, will now speak to us via video about why we are here this evening in greater depth.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Samsa, and I'm the Executive Director at SAVIS. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight as we again honor Take Back the Night. As all of you know, Take Back the Night started in the 1970s, where women demanded that our streets are safe for us at any time during the day and night. It's very bittersweet that we still have to demand this right, this basic right that all of us should feel safe, not only in our home, but in the streets, at home, at work, wherever we are, we should be safe as women and trans folks. I know this year is going to be really hard because we're doing through Zoom again, and hopefully next year we'll be able to come together and have our voices heard and have them heard very, very loudly. As a lot of you know, violence against women, sexual violence against women affects different communities in much more greater ways. For example, Indigenous women are more likely to be assaulted than non-Indigenous women. Trans and LGBTQ folks are also more likely to be assaulted than non-LGBTQ and trans folks. We have to make sure that our community is safe for everybody. The reason we are here, and we will continue to be here until the home and the streets are safe for all women and all trans folks. We will continue to march, we will continue to fight, and we will continue to have our voices heard loud and clear in government, in community, in all sectors of society. So please join me again next year as we continue to fight for society that ensures that violence against women is a thing of the past and that women feel safe in their homes, in their communities, in the streets. We will not stop until we are all safe.
Thank you, Sylvia, for your words of wisdom and empowerment. It is absolutely crucial to address the pressing need to end sexual violence, and as such, to define sexual violence and discuss the many forms which it takes in our society. Sexual violence is defined as a broad term, which includes any violence, physical or psychological, carried out through sexual means or by targeting sexuality. The scope of sexual violence is incredibly wide, and its presence is deeply rooted in many institutions and fixtures in our society, including Halton. Examples of the presence of sexual violence in our society are unfortunately not difficult to come by, as evidenced by the following tragic instances of sexual violence in the media recently. Bill Cosby's release from prison after admitting to raping approximately 60 women. He served just 3 years for this crime, undoubtedly contributing to the narrative that accountability is seriously lacking in the criminal justice system. Similarly, James Franco paid $2.2 million to settle a sexual assault case with 0 time served. Drake Bell's sentence of 2 years probation after pleading guilty to child endangerment related to survivor that he sexually harassed and abused, downplaying both the seriousness of the crime and skirting any responsibility for his actions whatsoever. This ultimately perpetuates a culture where culpability is minimal. And finally, the recent news of widespread sexual violence which took place on the University of Western Ontario campus just a week ago, demonstrating how relevant and tragic this issue is to this day. Bearing this knowledge in mind, I am honored to introduce two spoken word poets of immense grace and talent, Sammy McKay and Taylor Middleton. Sammy and Taylor have been so generous as to share their work, speaking to the need for greater attention to be paid to ending sexual violence and, more specifically, their respective dreams for survivors.
Hello, my name is Sammy McKay, and this is titled Under the Moon. Can you tell me, are we healing? Have these streets become just stone, or are we walking in the daylight rushing, trying to make it home before the moon returns? Can you tell me if you hear us? Perhaps it's just a hum, tired of chasing fading sunshine. Silent, we'll replace it with the drums of our hearts beating. Can you tell me, will you listen when these streets are ours to own? No more gripping keys as weapons, checking phones and dial tones, defenses. No more nights spent stuck at home when we could all be out. Now you will tell me we're naive, outspoken, stuck in dreams, goals we have we can't achieve, little girls made up of sweets, how we should try to keep the peace, close our mouths and take a seat. Let it happen, let it be, and I will tell you, don't mind me. Because we won't stop without a fight, use our voices to ignite, more than poems to recite, under this moon we'll reunite. Now there is something you can't see, there's hope and love and unity, as we have pulled into the streets time and time again, you'll see. Until the streets are ours to roam, no more worries when alone. Thank you.
Her mind was unwinding, and her tongue was toying with an ice cube while the rest of them rattled in a glass of half-drunk water. She was thinking about her daughter and how deep she would let herself sink to save that girl from drowning, from doubting herself, from ever not feeling enough. What does it really mean to be enough? She thought, on that hot August evening, the sun bleeding over her carpet as if a fire would erupt under her feet. And she felt a desire stoke a long-forgotten light inside her, burning a rage of deep orange, forcing her to forage in her own forests for the courage to continue to fight against her anger so bright it brings a glow to the night. What does it mean to be enough? To carry yourself, your baggage, your hurt, and your trauma. To still rise to the call of the sun and fall to the lullaby of the moon. To greet this earth again each day and night, fighting to be here. Crawling through your own trenches, boots soaked in countless defeats, and still you greet this earth. Still you choose to defy the lies that your beautiful brain stains on your velvet mind. Still you are here, she thought. And the stillness caught her in a palm of cold water as her daughter came into the room. What does it mean to be enough? Asked her little girl, her dark brown curls illuminated in that evening sun. No one could diminish that glow. Don't you know? Said the mother to her child. There is no way to measure a person's enoughness. Just like you cannot measure a wild horse's spirit or the rage of a winter wind, no matter how long you hear it. You see, my dear girl, the world can be dark and feel empty at times, but a new day will always come again. Even though we cannot undo the hurt that has been done, tomorrow will bring today again, and a new day again will come. And when it does, when we can feel the healing that's begun and realize that in the tug of war between being small and taking up space, we have already won. Enough is just a word we use to describe a quantity of something. So when we turn it inside out, the meaning changes. It seems to rearrange itself so that it is ours to define. And in time, we become the definition. We are what it means to be enough. Her daughter smiled. She felt good to know this fact that no matter what bad things may happen, they can never subtract from her enoughness. And that mother felt brave in this place she found herself in. Sucking on another piece of ice, she was floating above her own fire. Her warmth was pouring in from her heart to her feet. She is the highest peak of every mountain you'll ever meet. And when the carpet no longer bled, the sunset's hot liquid red, in her mind as she continued to unwind, she turned to an open field and screamed the sounds of a wild woman, her voice an all-encompassing call residing within all of us.
The past year, building on the year prior, has been full of unprecedented circumstances and tragedies. These tragedies have occurred in the contexts of our political, social, and public health climates worldwide, but also in Canada and in Halton in particular. As we know, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, sexual violence impacted 1 in 3 Canadian women. This statistic is staggering to me. Every time I read it, my heart sinks a little bit, particularly given the understanding that these numbers are likely not wholly reflective of the impact of sexual violence due to underreporting, shame, stigma, and victim blaming, among other factors. Sexual violence during the time of COVID-19 is referred to as a shadow pandemic, a simultaneous, intense, widespread, persistent outbreak of violence waged against women. Violence has been exacerbated by many factors unique to our current circumstances, specifically those related to stay-at-home orders and social isolation. Furthermore, it is critical to note that in the Canadian context, both the frequency and intensity of domestic violence has increased in the last 19 months, during which the pandemic has continued to wage war on women and gender-diverse folks. The Ontario-based Assaulted Women's Helpline reported receiving 8,000 more calls between September 1st and December 31st, 2020 than they did in the same time period the year prior. This increase is statistically significant. However, unfortunately, much of the increase in sexual violence during the last 2 years has been felt but not quantified due to persistent underreporting. The rise of sexual violence, among other injustices, has amply illuminated the need for community partnerships, alliances, and a comprehensive support system for survivors. As such, it is my pleasure to introduce you to one of SAVIS's community partnerships, Jerusha and Andrea of Halton Women's Place.
Hello, my name is Andrea from Halton Women's Place Public Education Team. We are very honored to be speaking this year at Take Back the Night. The importance of speaking out against sexual violence is not a survivor's responsibility. It is our community's obligation to ending violence. At Halton Women's Place, we provide shelter and crisis services for physically, emotionally, financially, and sexually abused women and their children. As public educators, our role is to bring awareness into community and with the hopes of preventing future violence and building healthier communities. As an organization, we support survivors from an intersectional and trauma-informed lens. We understand that healing is never linear, and we work very hard to ensure and provide folks with the tools they need to understand their own trauma. Our survivor-centric model empowers survivors to take power and control back over their lives so they can shift thinking from, what is wrong with me, to what happened to me. Halton Women's Place is also part of the Sexual Assault Action Committee, which is comprised of various community partners, including SAVIS and the Halton Police, working together to better support survivors. That being said, one does not have to be in the committee or in the social services realm to support and make profound impact. Simply learning and the facts and listening to survivors in your network can make the biggest difference. A woman is killed every 6 days in Canada by her intimate partner. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men, and 80% of trans youth will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. Family violence costs Canadian society $7.4 billion annually. Those stats are why we are here today and why we should stand beside survivors. No one asks for sexual violence, and as an organization, we do not stand by, but we stand up for survivors because we can shatter the silence and claim victory over violence. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to my colleague, Jerusha.
Good evening. My name is Jerusha Mack, and I'm the Violence Prevention and Community Education Supervisor at Halton Women's Place. Everyone has the right to safety, wherever they may be, whether at home, at work, on the street, or anywhere else. When it comes to the issue of sexual violence, that statement should remain just as valid and just as true. And yet, within our society and culture, there are nuances when it comes to sexual violence and where you were, what time of day it was, what you were wearing, what you were doing, or if you were somehow sending subliminal messages to your perpetrator. The focus is too often on the victim's culpability in an act that was perpetrated on them. When we focus more on scrutinizing a survivor's story to validate their experiences, rather than focusing on the perpetrator's actions, beliefs, and attitudes, we re-victimize, we re-traumatize, and we enable sexual violence. We enable a world in which sexual violence is acceptable and will continue. The shaming and blaming of victims is so pervasive within the fabric of our society and culture that it is felt on a cellular level by those who have experienced sexual violence and those who will. As a survivor myself, even though I was a child, I still struggled well into my adulthood with the subliminal societal idea that somehow I was to blame for my own victimization. What did I do? What could I have done differently? Will people believe me? Shame and guilt was a burden that I unfairly carried on my shoulders for over 15 years. And I know there are so many other survivors who carry shame and guilt that is not theirs to bear. I know there are survivors who have carried their experiences in silence and secrecy, just like I did, because our society and world is not one in which survivors of sexual violence feel safe, feel that they will be validated, be supported, or be believed. We have all often heard these lines: we must educate about consent, we must stop victim blaming, we must support survivors. All of these statements are true, but is there something deeper than consent education that we aren't addressing? Will sexual violence end once we've taught everyone to respect other people's boundaries? Or is there a deeper systemic cultural issue that we are overlooking and ignoring? Sexual assault is the only violent crime in Canada that is not declining. In Canada, women are at a greater risk than men for all violent crimes, including sexual assault and other forms of sexual violence. Statistics have told us this for decades. So did we need a #MeToo to have an awakening and to truly understand the scope and the depth of this epidemic within our society? Or did MeToo simply shame us out of our numbness of accepting and normalizing the unhealthy behaviors and attitudes that have too long perpetuated sexual violence? Was MeToo the latest trending bit of news we paid attention to, found entertaining and sensationalized, and have now forgotten? To end gender-based violence and sexual violence, we all need to be a part of the solution. We need to engage in allyship and support victims of sexual violence in a meaningful way, one that goes beyond superficial acts. Each of us has agency in being able to create change. The work to end sexual violence starts with each of us looking inward and finding the ways in which our apathy, our ignorance, and our indifference have enabled the continued pervasive nature of sexual violence within our community. What would the world be like for a survivor if media stories focused more on the perpetrator than on the victim? If newspaper stories emphasized the culpability of the rapist and didn't use language that eroticized sexual violence? If our justice system didn't re-traumatize victims and put them on trial, didn't penalize them for the symptoms of their trauma? What could a world be like for survivors when we didn't languish between terminology and language that re-victimized and invalidated survivors? Was it non-consensual sex, rape, molestation, sexual misconduct, sexual assault, or sexual violence. Language reflects culture, and our language reflects a culture that does not want to make it easy to talk about sexual violence, that wants to make it difficult, uncomfortable, and confusing. It is on each one of us to expose and undo the attitudes and systems that for too long have enabled sexual violence. When we fail to hold perpetrators accountable for their behavior, whether that is through our legal systems or within our cultural dialogue, we are encouraging and supporting further acts of sexual violence. We are contributing to the continued prevalence of sexual violence. It is on each of us to recognize and challenge the normalizing of unhealthy discourse, attitudes, and behaviors when we see it and hear it, whether that is in our media, culture, or systems. Sexual violence needs to be reframed within our discourse. It is not the responsibility of children, women, or any survivor to protect themselves or avoid sexual violence. Sexual violence is never the victim's fault, and your role is simply one of comforting and supporting, not questioning. All forms of sexual violence, no matter the label, systems, or society may want to ascribe to them, are deeply harmful. Listen and learn. Don't interrupt, even if you don't know what to say. Give survivors a judgment-free space to share. I believe you. I'm here for you. Halton Women's Place can't end violence against women on our own. Our public education team can't do it alone. SAVIS can't end sexual violence on their own. Each of us has a part to play. Each of us has a role. It can be as simple as privately asking a friend not to make inappropriate comments, telling them why their comments are victim-blaming and harmful, or it can be as public as intervening or calling out inappropriate behaviors. Taking action in some way, shape, or form begins to change the thoughts, beliefs, and norms of a community. These small but long-reaching actions can create tremendous change. We start the wheels of change when we do something that interrupts or brings attention to something people see as normal or accepted, whether that's harmful language, attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. Each of us can help a survivor realize their dream, whether it's their dream to regain their power, to pursue fair and just legal action, to advocate, or to seek and receive support. There are survivors of sexual violence in your workplace, in your schools, in your family, in your friend circles, in your networks, in your neighborhood. You don't need to know their stories. You may not even be aware they are a survivor. You don't need to identify a victim to be an ally or to support survivors of sexual violence. Your awakening to finding your role in ending sexual violence within our community, your conscious decision to educate yourself about the issue and learn how you can better support survivors, how you can change your language, how you can move from a space of apathy, ignorance, and inaction to one of agency and true allyship. These are all ways in which each of us can be a drop that creates a ripple, that creates a wave. You are the beginning of ending sexual violence. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that powerful message, Jerusha and Andrea. I will now play another fantastic video from a community partner of ours, the United Way of Hamilton, Halton.
This year, as we continue to face challenges intensified by the pandemic, Take Back the Night has never been more important. We've seen inequities worsen, domestic and sexual violence increase, and isolation is even more prevalent. At United Way Halton and Hamilton, we support the work and capacity of our social services to address these issues, to get at roots of violence and support survivors in their healing. Although our community faces collective challenges, we are here to help create and support the solutions. We want you to know United Way stands in solidarity with SAVIS, Take Back the Night, and survivors. And these are our messages for you. I dream that you find your voice and that you help others find theirs.
I dream of a time when our spaces, relationships, and inner peace are not tainted by those who believe they can control women, trans, and non-binary people.
My dream for survivors is that you know you are strong, capable, and worthy.
Thank you very much for that wonderful video. We could not do what we do without the support of our community partners and all of the wonderful folks at home watching this evening. Resilience is defined as the ability to bounce back after facing adversity, and often brings to mind the words toughness, strength, and adaptability. To be a survivor is to be resilient in all senses of the word. Raina Harton is a singer, songwriter, and activist, and embodies this notion of resilience in all of its forms. It is my honor to debut for you all this evening a wonderful original song by Raina.
She leaves the room, you make your move. You're on me, disregarding the rules. Ears closed when I ask to stop. I'm in pain, is that not enough? You left me broken and bleeding and bruised. All of me inside and outside is used. I trusted you, but now I'm begging for help. Somebody come pull me out of this hell. I can't sleep without hearing your voice. The nightmares cut me deep, and if I had the choice, I'd go back to a million things different. Scream out the words, screw you. But till then, I tell my innocence I miss you. Doctor tells me he's sorry, take some pills for PTSD. Wanna rip my skin apart, a shower has never made me feel less clean. Teacher moves me to the back of the class as if it would make things better. Everybody loves you, but no one knows the real you. Makes my head hurt. You left me broken and bleeding and bruised. All of me inside and outside is used. I shouldered the burden, then broke mama's heart. Is there a button where I hit restart? I can't sleep without hearing your voice. The nightmares cut me deep, and if I had the choice, I'd go back to a million things different. Scream out the words, screw you. But till then, I tell my innocence I miss you. You are catastrophe defined. You made a mess of your life. Why'd you have to make one of I can't sleep without hearing your voice. Soon the nightmares won't cut me deep, and if I had the choice, I wouldn't go back. Wouldn't do a million things different. 'Cause it wasn't my fault, like you made me believe. No, it wasn't my fault. My innocence still belongs to me.
Thank you so much, Raina, for that beautiful performance. Just as sexual violence has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, it is critical to acknowledge that sexual violence disproportionately impacts folks from certain communities or folks who have specific characteristics. In other words, sexual violence disproportionately impacts Indigenous women, LGBTQ+ folks, BIPOC and disabled folks, to name a few particularly impacted vulnerable populations. On this matter, I believe the numbers speak for themselves. The levels of violence faced by Indigenous folks is exorbitantly disproportionate, as highlighted by Sylvia earlier this evening. In 2018, more than 6 in 10 Indigenous women reported experiencing physical or sexual assault at some point since the age of 15. Comparatively, 4 in 10 non-Indigenous women reported facing violence during this period. A study conducted by the Canadian Women's Foundation found that women who identified as lesbian or bisexual were 3 to 4 times more likely than heterosexual women to report experiencing spousal violence. It has also been demonstrated by the Canadian Women's Foundation that when women of color report violence, their experiences are often taken less seriously within the criminal justice system, and their perpetrators routinely receive less harsh punishments. This illuminates the strength of barriers to coming forward about sexual violence and the ways in which these barriers are particularly impactful for folks who are already disproportionately impacted by sexual violence. It is absolutely critical that we, as allies, supporters, survivors, and friends, actively fight to dispel the idea of ideal victims. Sexual violence impacts folks from all races, religions, sexual orientations, genders, socioeconomic statuses, neighborhoods, schools, and regions. We must confront stereotypes and remain steadfast in our commitment to spotlight and emphasize the voices of folks who historically and presently experience sexual violence at disproportionate rates. At this time, I would like to play for you all a powerful message from our Chair of the Board of Directors, Ruth Chun, followed by addresses from local politicians, members of Parliament Anita Anand and Pam Damoff.
Hi, I'm Ruth Chun, and I'm the chair of SAVIS. Thank you for joining us for Take Back the Night 2021. What does Take Back the Night mean for me? It means taking up space when normally some of us may feel unsafe or fearful to be alone or to walk during the night. It means highlighting the issues of why some people in our community feel unsafe or fearful to be in their neighborhoods here in Halton. It means allies, survivors, supporters, community members gathering together to take back the night and claim the streets of Halton as safe and as supportive of survivors. Cultural barriers for speaking out on sexual assault are across all cultures and all genders. I'm very proud of the work that SAVIS has done with Aidan O'Keefe in raising awareness to male survivors of sexual assault. SAVIS has seen an uptick in people who are coming forward for male-identified services for survivors of sexual assault. I believe that constructs such as gender and heteronormativity are constraints that prevent people from speaking out or speaking up for being survivors of sexual assault. So I believe that these are barriers to people accessing services such as those from SAVIS. Where there is a culture of shame or not speaking up, these can constrain whether people want to come forward, let alone identify what has happened or identify as a victim or hopefully a survivor. These are things that I think are pan-cultural across Canada and things that need to be broken in terms of stigma. My dream for survivors is that they feel comfortable and welcome to come to SAVIS, speak out, feel supported, and never judged. My dream for survivors everywhere is that they are recognized and that there is a framework, not just in their communities, but nationally and in terms of all of our systems to support them in terms of health, mental health, and socially. The trauma of sexual assault is ubiquitous, not just in Halton, but across genders and across cultures. My dream is that communities, governments, and people worldwide will recognize the impacts of sexual assault on everybody. The trauma of sexual assault on survivors affects those who are interconnected with our survivors, and we need healing and support. And for that, we need funding, and we need interconnection of all of our service providers in order to provide support for everyone who is affected by sexual assault. My dream is that everyone can work together to heal survivors of sexual assault. Take Back the Night also means explaining to my 2 young boys why it matters. Take Back the Night means explaining to my 2 sons why sometimes some women and some men do not feel comfortable walking at nighttime or in the streets of our community. Take Back the Night means having those conversations with people about consent, about sexuality, power, gender, and safety. Take Back the Night means focusing on this and committing as a community to create safety not just physically in our streets and during the night, but also among all of our individuals who make up Halton. With the events of the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic, the uprising and death of George Floyd, anti-Asian hate violence increasing, and the discovery of unmarked graves at residential schools and the Every Child Matters movement, there is a recognition of the intersectionality of race and the work that we do here at SAVIS. Part of my dream is that the intersectional analysis of race and inequality be always embedded into the sexual assault services that we provide here at SAVIS. Globally, we are at a critical juncture to do things differently. With the mental health pandemic that's been highlighted through the global COVID-19 pandemic, conversations around mental health and race are flourishing. It is our opportunity now to make sure that these are embedded in how we approach one another, in how we approach sexual assault services, and how we improve inequality everywhere. The events of the past year have shown that, without a doubt, mental health issues, racism, and here at SAVIS we know that sexual assault are issues that are part of Halton. We cannot deny that this is part of our community, and now as we do better and rebuild, my hope is that we always integrate these things here, starting in Halton and all around the world.
My name is Anita Anand, and I'm speaking to you today from the territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We are grateful for the use of this land. I wanted to thank SAVIS of Halton for the work they do in our community, as well as to indicate to the Indigenous people in our community how dedicated I am and that I am an ally with you. This year has been difficult, especially with the discovery of unmarked graves at residential schools. This is a time for us to recommit to truth and reconciliation. And I wanted to let you know that reconciliation is an important issue for me and for our government, and we will continue to walk the road of reconciliation as we must do. Thank you. Merci. Megwetch.
Welcome to the 2021 virtual Take Back the Night. I look forward to the time when we can again gather in person to take back the night here in Halton. Sadly, there are far too many survivors of sexual assault and harassment still within our community. In particular, those who are racialized, Muslim women, Indigenous women, who face horrendous situations in their home communities. I have been really proud of the work that we have done in particular to support Indigenous women survivors by investing $724 million in the Fall Economic Statement in 2021 in the Family Violence Prevention Program, which provided funding to 46 shelters and is building 12 new shelters to support women, their families, and the LGBTQ2+ community. We need to work together to support survivors. My dream is that we no longer have to even talk about this. My dream is that we will finally get to the point where we don't have to take back the night, where we feel safe walking on the streets. That's not the case today. So thank you to everyone who has joined tonight. Thank you to SAVIS for continuing to hold Take Back the Night events across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam, Anita, and Ruth. I bet some of you are probably wondering where to go from here. I would suggest to begin by volunteering, donating, educating yourself, using your social media and social networks as a platform to speak out, supporting the women and gender diverse folks in your life, and most of all, always believing and supporting survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. Believe survivors you know, believe survivors you don't know. Believe survivors you read about in the news or you hear about online. Believing survivors unconditionally is the first step towards ending sexual violence once and for all. I would like to thank everyone for attending this year's Take Back the Night and invite you all to listen to our final performance of the evening, a song entitled I Believe You, written and sung by longtime SAVIS supporter, musician, and longstanding advocate for survivors of sexual violence, Saffron A. Following this performance, I will give the floor to SAVIS's wonderful Executive Director, Sylvia, to deliver some concluding remarks.
For trusting me. I believe you, and although there's doubt, ask you questions about what happened. They think they're helpful, telling you to move on, cause they can't see what's wrong with our sentiment. People don't know, we all need to grow and educate ourselves. I believe you, others do as well. I believe you, there's no need to explain, others do as well. I believe you, without a doubt. I believe you, there's no need to explain, others do as well. I believe you, without a doubt. I believe you.
Thank you very much. I really want to thank everybody for coming. What an amazing night. I wish we were all together. It would have been a beautiful night to take over the streets of Halton. So as has been indicated, is the sexual assaults in terms of what's happened out of Western Ontario, I think have just again highlighted that sexual assault is present. It keeps being, as was mentioned, it keeps being increased rather than having to decrease it. And that's what we're fighting for. So again, for a call for action, use your voice, be loud about it, hold perpetrators accountable, advocate for systematic change, call out narratives that victim blame, because as we said, we have to believe survivors. Tomorrow there's a National I Believe You Day, and there's been a call for action to have a walkout in campuses across Ontario. So I know we're all in solidarity with that as we again fight to have our streets, our communities, our homes safe for survivors. I look forward to seeing you all in person next year. And again, thank you very much for coming out tonight. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.